Talk with Congressman Latham, and then we're going to talk with
some limitations and details.
Back to the conversation. Mickelson here with you. It is Congressman Tom Latham's turn to talk with us here this morning. The president's coming to visit Iowa. Congressman Latham, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Jan, it's great to be with you this morning.
What would you like us to know?
Well, it's interesting. He's coming to Iowa to talk about jobs. Apparently, he's trying to find out where those jobs are because the stimulus certainly hasn't produced any new jobs, and we're going the wrong way. And it's his policies, basically, that are killing job opportunities in this country. When you look at this next year, that you're going to have marginal tax rates go up, capital gains tax rates go up. In the health care bill, there's another 3.8% tax on top of normal capital gains rates. You've got cap and trade that is going to stifle the economy as far as increase in utility costs.
Are you going to let that happen?
We're going to do everything we can to stop it, but they're keep pushing on this agenda that just has more and more government control of our economy. The health care bill that they passed, it's by the president's own administration, is going to cost $311 billion more than what they anticipated and have the cost curve go way up rather than bend it down like he talked about before. But all of these things are scaring the dickens out of small business people that are the job generators in this country. And when you look at your tax rates going up, when you look at increased costs, whether it be cap and trade or health care, you're not going to hire more people because you're punished for doing it under what the policies are of this administration.
Didn't I see the president announce, as I was leaving my studio this morning, he was announcing a new policy. I thought it was a 3-year moratorium on the cost of, or on the government itself, on government. You're not going to expand government or the price of government or something. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Well, earlier in the budget proposal, they had talked about capping any increase in discretionary spending for other than defense, homeland security. Well, Jan, it's not too hard to do when you've had a 62% increase in the last 12 months in those accounts, and then to say that you're going to, cap them at that for a period of time. If you just got a 62% increase in your wages, you probably wouldn't need another raise maybe for a year or two. And that's exactly the kind of funny numbers that they come up with. The idea that they're not increasing spending is just ludicrous when you've got $311 billion more in the health care bill than what they said there was going to be. They've already signed into law $760 billion of new taxes on our country. And
will the Bush tax cuts be allowed to expire?
Well, that's the way they're going right now. That's certainly for higher income people. They still haven't done anything about the death tax. That's going to kick back in next year. But that's, the proposal basically is to have these taxes raised so that they can get more money in the federal coffers so that they can expand the government even more than what it is.
I was listening to one of the news channels this morning, and they were talking about the regulation of Wall Street. And Senator Bernie Sanders, you'll recognize he's a socialist,
right.
But he was on MSNBC talking about Goldman Sachs. And let me play the soundbite for you, because if this is what the kind of rhetoric that's being sold, I'm kind of wondering, and his figures were left unchallenged. I want you to hear what he had to say.
Okay.
4 major financial institutions in this country that have assets of over $700 trillion, which is more than half of the GDP in America. You want to prevent future bailouts, you got to break these guys up, not only from a too big to fail perspective and taxpayer liability, you got to break them up from an economic competitive perspective. Does anybody in your room feel comfortable that 4 or 6 financial institutions, all of which have grown in recent years, have so much economic power over the lives of the American people?
Now, it's interesting. That's incoherent.
Yeah.
First off, he says the derivative market's like $700 trillion, which it is. But he says that's half of our GDP.
Well,
our GDP is about $15 trillion.
Right.
And the derivative market's like 10 times what he said it was.
Yeah.
So is that a lapse of judgment? Doesn't he know any better? I mean, the fact that this derivative market is literally more than the entire wealth that's produced by the planet.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's obvious that it's a political speech. It has no basis in reality. And when you start saying numbers like that are just totally outrageous, obviously he doesn't know what's going on. You know what's going to happen, Jan, with this the financial regulation. The way it's written today, you talk to anybody who invests in startup businesses, and they're going to quit. There's not going to be the capital there available for, like up at Iowa State, there's a lot of technology transfer into the private sector, startup businesses trying to get a toehold. They need initial financing. That's going to go away. It's going to dry. And you talk to any of these investment guys, and certainly in Iowa, we've got some, like John Papajohn, those guys, they're going to have to stop because it'll just be impossible to comply with all the new regulations for them to help these small businesses get going. Okay. And it's crazy. I mean, that's why the president's here looking for those jobs, because nobody else can find them.
Well, this morning he's passing around his idea of rallying the troops. He went to the DNC, and he's got this message. He says he's rallying the troops, and here's who he thinks his troops are.
Today, the health insurance companies, the Wall Street banks, and the special interests who have ruled Washington for too long are already focused on November's congressional elections. They see these elections as a chance to put their allies back in power and to undo all that we've accomplished. It will be up to each of you to make sure that the young people, African Americans, Latinos, and women who powered our victory in 2008 stand together once again.
So he's visiting Ottumwa.
Right.
That's a pocket full of Hispanics and minorities down there. What the heck is going on in this country, Congressman Latham?
Well, it's not good. Yeah, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's interesting for him to demagogue about, like Goldman Sachs, when they gave him $1 million in the last election cycle to get him elected president. So if he's talking about his buddies, that's who he's talking about, is his buddies on Wall Street. And when you look at where the money goes, a very small percentage goes to our side of the aisle compared to what it does over there.
I know you've got to move on here in a second, but I've got to ask you one more question because this is just, I'm ready to explode this morning. I'm sorry. But it says here that our National Guard, we're sending a National Guard unit, 60 Iowa National Guard soldiers are going to Afghanistan to help them build their agriculture. So they can find a legitimate crop other than poppies to grow. Where in the blazes where did that become a nation building and agricultural deployment become part of the mission of the National Guard?
Well, I agree. Well, it was never intended to be that way. Obviously, there's a huge problem in Afghanistan with the drug trade, but it's not a matter of it's more profitable for the farmer to produce drugs than it is to produce other crops. The problem is,
do we care?
Well, the Taliban goes and up to their doorstep and says, if you don't raise poppies, your family will not see, the morning come. And that's what the threat is. I mean, we've got to have security there before anybody thinks about doing this type of nation building. There's just no question that the farmers would rather raise other crops other than poppies, but they're afraid for their lives if they don't do it. No, it's not something that the National Guard was meant to do. You're exactly right.
Should that be a matter of domestic politics? Should the people who are in command of the Iowa National Guard say some of these guys are in their third deployment, fourth deployment in some cases, and you're really going to send them over to tend gardens for Afghan farmers?
Well, once they're activated, they're under the control of the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, as far as their mission is concerned. But certainly I think a lot of people have to have second thoughts about what's going on over there when they deploy our people to do things like this.
Final word, Congressman Latham, what do you want us to know more than anything else this morning?
Well, I think with the president in Iowa supposedly talking about jobs, that it's the policies that they have put in place that have stopped job growth, and that we've got to finally have some common sense around here, and the huge expansion of the federal government is the last thing we need to create jobs in the private sector. The stimulus package was only meant to create more government jobs. It was never intended to actually do anything in the private sector, and all this administration and all the Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid have done so far is to kill job creation in the private sector.
Congressman Latham, thank you for your time this morning.
You bet. Thank you, Jan.
You bet. A brief time out, back in a moment on 1040 WHO. Oh, I should have told you this earlier. But for today, and I don't know how long this is going to last, we have some technical issues, some technical challenges here to deal with this morning. And for our purposes here today, if you'd like to be part of the normal conversation, you'll need to use a slightly different number than the one we normally use. It's 284. Instead of saying 1040, which we will go back to as soon as we can.